Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, friends around this virtual meeting room. A very warm welcome to day 2 of the Big Data Forum. We really had a very engaged session yesterday, actually quite a few sessions with many participants, and we're really looking forward to continuing this today. So we welcome you to the first segment of day 2, which will continue to look at the transformational role of big data technologies and analytics with a focus on economic transformation. For this, we will use this first segment to look at how we can create a smarter economy through technology and analytics. We'll be looking at the potential of big data technologies as tools for more effective economic and financial modeling. We also want to look at how the path to a fully digital Trinidad and Tobago can support the growth and diversification of the economy. Last but not least, we would also like to touch on some of the barriers that we will need to overcome, such as privacy, ethical, or some security challenges that was very much also debated yesterday already. So it is our great pleasure to welcome the acting Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago and the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Colm Imbert. Minister, thank you so much for joining us this morning, despite your very heavy agenda that you're carrying at the moment. Really our pleasure and very appreciated. So just, of course, a few words on your background, even though, of course, everyone knows you very well. A graduate of the University of the West Indies, the University of Manchester in England, and the Robert Gordon University in Scotland. He is a qualified civil engineer and registered engineer with 2 degrees in engineering and 2 postgraduate degrees in law. The Honorable Minister was re-elected for the 9th time to the House of the Representatives in 2020, has served as an elected member of parliament for over 30 years, and as a cabinet minister in 6 governments for an aggregate cabinet experience of over 18 years. During his career, of course, he has served as Minister of Works and Transport, Minister of Local Government, Minister of Health, Minister of Science, Technology and Tertiary Education, and he is currently serving in his 2nd consecutive term as the country's Minister of Finance. We're very much looking forward to the keynote, which will set us off to this 2nd day of our Big Data Forum. But the Minister will, in the following panel discussion, be joined from 2 more colleagues that are already online. I'm very much looking forward to have them contribute. We'll welcome this morning also Gianpiero Leoncini, who is the representative in Trinidad and Tobago of the Development Bank of Latin America, or CAF, since April 2019, in fact. Mr. Leoncini has had high-level working experience and exposure at CAF for almost 10 years, occupying different strategic positions in the bank's General Secretariat, building, managing strategic alliances with international organizations, governments, and universities and think tanks. As director of the Secretariat in External Relations, he was in charge of coordinating CAF's governing bodies and CAF's global outreach. He did join CAF from the Andean Community General Secretariat, where he worked in the areas of international negotiations, external relations, and political cooperation in the cabinet of the Secretary General. Mr. Leoncini is a graduate of the Sciences Po Paris and has a master's degree in public administration from the École Nationale d'Administration in France. Last but not least, we're very, very happy to welcome also John Outridge to this panel that will start immediately after the keynote address by the Honourable Minister. Mr. Outridge is the Chief Executive Officer of the Trinidad and Tobago International Financial Center. And as such, he's responsible for leading the company and adopting digital financial services across all sectors in Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Outridge, of course, has over 10 years of senior management experience and has worked from firms such as Ernst & Young, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and iGov Trinidad and Tobago. He has supported both public and private sector institutions with strategic guidance on fintech strategies, the modernization of public and financial management systems throughout the region. He's a graduate from the Arthur Lockjack Graduate School of Business and still lectures on digital and technology management at the University of Bedfordshire in the UK. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We're really looking forward to a very engaged discussion following the keynote address. We will welcome questions and remarks from the many participants. But on this note, it's my great pleasure, Minister, to hand over the floor to you. Again, a massive thank you for making time for us despite your very busy agenda. The floor is yours, Minister.
Thank you very much. And good morning to all, especially Ms. Walters, our resident coordinator of the United Nations in Trinidad and Tobago. My fellow panelists, Mr. Leoncini from CAF, Mr. Outridge from the TTIFC, all the listening and viewing audience, other distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the media, my pleasure to be here. And it is indeed my pleasure to share some thoughts with you on the transformational role of big data technologies and analytics for the government of Trinidad and Tobago, and to highlight some of the work that the Ministry of Finance is doing in pursuit of our agenda to transform Trinidad and Tobago into a digital nation. There is no gainsaying the fact that the unprecedented disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated the need for digital transformation. Economic systems, industry structures, and business models have been upended, highlighting social inequalities, governance issues, and the frailty of life itself. In fact, the pandemic showed us how interdependent we all are, how reliant we are on technology,
recording in progress,
and how critical and useful data is to our everyday life. The pandemic has significantly increased data consumption and applications in many ways, with businesses seeing increased engagement from existing customers and an influx of new digital customers. This shift to a more digital economy has also enabled the public sector to accumulate large volumes of data. Big data is a concept that has emerged in recent times and encapsulates a new global development and sustainability paradigm. It refers to data that is so large, fast, and complex that it is difficult to process using traditional methods. It involves extremely large data sets that may be analyzed computationally to reveal patterns, trends, and associations, especially relating to human behavior and interactions. It includes the vast amount of information passively collected from everyday interactions with government departments, digital products or services, including mobile phones, credit cards, GPS devices, and social media. Big data can be characterized using what many data scientists and analytics refer to as the 5 V's, which are volume, the size of the data set, it has to be large. Velocity, which refers to how quickly data is generated, collected, and analyzed, ideally as close to real time as possible. Variety, which refers to the diverse data types collected from various sources. Veracity refers to the quality of data. Is it clean and accurate? Value. This is a critical component because the aggregation of data does not necessarily translate to value. What matters most is how you use the information you have collected and what insights can be extracted and applied. According to a recent United Nations report, 64.2 zettabytes of data were created in 2020, representing a 314% increase from 2015. I'm told, because this is a term that I had to learn, that a zettabyte is 1 trillion gigabytes. And I can actually remember a time when 1 gigabyte was considered large. This means that data is now being created and used at an exponential rate. In our ever-changing world, the focus is shifting from the quantity of data to appreciating the value of data. Big data is an untapped resource and is the lifeblood of decision-making and the raw material for accountability. It is now the currency of the technological economy and is incorporated into every sector, from manufacturing, banking, and agriculture to disaster risk reduction, urban management, and biodiversity monitoring. Many countries have come to regard big data as a growth engine for the future and a solution to existing economic and social problems. It has enormous potential in the public sector, and governments worldwide have announced comprehensive strategies for using big data at the national level. Information that is readily available in real time enables government agencies and departments to easily identify areas in need of attention. More diverse, integrated, timely, and trustworthy information now leads to better decision-making and real-time citizen feedback. The provision of the right information on the right things at the right time enables public and private institutions, individuals and companies to make the right choices that are good for them and the world we live in. Governments are also exploring ways to systematically use big data collected by the financial sector to understand the needs and nuances of institutions and elements operating a financial system and how this system fits into the wider economy. These innovative approaches can help identify development needs, provide early warning signals on potential emergencies or crises, plan, implement, and evaluate national development programs. Advances in computing and data science now make it possible to process and analyze big data in real time to provide information that would have been unimaginable just a few years ago. Governments across the globe are now focusing on analyzing big data to modernize services and improve their economies. In April 2020, the Chinese government indicated its intent to recognize data as a new factor of production, stating that data is now listed as one of the factors alongside traditional factors such as land, labor, capital, and technology. The Chinese government has also launched an Internet Plus policy to use big data to help develop the economy. Internet Plus is designed to improve the efficiency of the market and to assist in building a planned economy. China is utilizing big data for taxation in many ways. China's tax administration system makes extensive use of big data solutions that use multi and cross-referencing to verify business information. Other examples are India's established open government data platform, which provides public data to analysts, researchers, and practitioners. The Republic of Korea is leading public big data applications for transportation planning at the city level, monitoring of infectious diseases, manufacturing process analyses, and business engagement. Ireland has created a joint industry government task force to drive the development of big data in that country. These are just a few examples. Now we need to strike the right balance in all of this. The government of Trinidad and Tobago recognizes all the advantages that can be gained by the effective use of data to inform decision-making. Ensuring sustainable development calls for innovative ideas utilizing new and multiple sources of data for more effective economic and financial modeling. Big data analytics is thus an intelligent solution which allows governments to make better decisions and inform their development plans. The process gives us the ability to access data, to examine it, to be able to understand it, to process it, to extract value from it. Big data has enormous potential in the public sector. The government's engagement with citizens, such as managing and distributing social benefits, collecting taxes, monitoring the national health and education systems, recording traffic data, and issuing official documents, generates and collects vast amounts of data each day. Information that is readily available in real time enables government agencies and departments to make more informed decisions, improve their services, and take appropriate action quickly. Big data is key to improving the delivery of services. For example, while our national census can identify where vulnerable populations reside, The additional knowledge provided by big data analytics, especially mobile data, allows us to develop high quality demographics to support the delivery of targeted services to these vulnerable groups. Predictive healthcare analytics can be used to guide the distribution of medical equipment, medication, and personnel. Predictive modeling can be used to generate updated coronavirus spread maps, so the public can see which regions are expected to see a rise in COVID-19 infection cases. These predictive mapping technologies may also be used to position healthcare workers, supplies, field hospitals, and other resources in the locations with the greatest need. These models can be quite diverse, from exploring people's reactions to the virus on social media to generating data-driven models to evaluate COVID-19 interventions, tracking bed capacity at hospitals, and working on virus genome sequencing to evaluate what we know about the virus. As Minister of Finance in the annual budget exercise, I rely on a lot of data to guide us as we project revenue for the coming year. In particular, big data is the foundation for estimating oil and gas prices and production, which are essential elements of our budget process. Data is also a critical part of our ICT plan, and we are ensuring that the fundamental principles of this plan are embraced and practiced throughout its operations. Some of these principles that we are focused on are the principle of data centricity, managing data as an asset and sharing data to provide added value to services and operations. Reliability and assurance, to gain the confidence and trust of citizens and customers with secure and reliable digital services. And transparency, data, information, processes, and decisions on the information society must be public and be made understandable without prejudice to any stakeholder. To ensure that the financial sector can harness the benefits of modern technologies, it must focus on standardizing its approaches to reporting, collecting, and analyzing data, introducing and supporting legislation that promotes an enabling environment and embraces technology like artificial intelligence and machine learning, which will present additional avenues for learning and decision-making. The key strategy of the Ministry of Finance is to utilize agencies like the Trinidad and Tobago International Financial Center to drive change within the public sector. We have thus given the TTIFC a revised mandate as the lead agency of the Ministry of Finance for digitalization initiatives within the financial services sector as we seek to attain our goal of becoming a cashless society. One of the strategic objectives that the TTIFC has been asked to focus on is the rapid digitalization of payments in the public sector. This will allow for greater data transparency with revenue collection. It can lead to improvement in public financial management and the recording and publishing of fiscal data. Big data analytics in the public sector will also allow us to identify double payments and double dipping so as to eliminate waste and duplication. Digitalization of government payments will also promote fiscal discipline, assist resource allocation, and improve operational efficiency and transparency. A central database with a real-time record will enable the government to plan, execute, and monitor its revenues and expenditures to facilitate more effective management of fiscal accounts at the level of both the central and local governments. An example of how big data can be used to support this process is in the Inland Revenue Division, which is the principal tax collection agency for the government of Trinidad and Tobago, accounting for over 75% of the government's revenue from all sources. At present, the government is seeking to enable multiple forms of electronic funds transfer for both the convenience of the taxpayer and to aid greater efficiency for the Inland Revenue Division. The division accepts payments for 24 distinct types of taxes with varying amounts across each. Through the cross-referencing of the Inland Revenue data, as well as other external data sources, such as commercial banks, companies and land registries and our motor vehicle licensing division, the Inland Revenue Division would be able to better develop profiles for taxpayers and identify patterns of interest to aid the division in compliance. Now let's see how we translate ambition into action. As you would have noted from my recent 2022 budget statement, the government is mindful of the urgency of digital transformation. In that statement, I listed several initiatives that are focused on enhancing ICT and digital transformation and the collection of and use of data analytics to drive informed decision-making, such as increasing ICT access and closing the digital divide. And this is being driven by our investment in education and technology infrastructure. We have introduced TT Wi-Fi, which will continue to provide free broadband access in highly populated and frequented areas, such as transport hubs, hospital waiting rooms, libraries, and schools. ICT access centers across the country are to be increased from 6 to 50 in the coming year in digitally underserved communities. Digital skills training will be provided for 10,000 persons, followed by another 2,000 under the Microsoft Philanthropic Group arrangement. And broadband service will be provided in at least 25 underserved communities. The potential for big data to transform government is vast. Digital transformation activities are occurring in all ministries at various levels. Some examples of these are the Ministry of Digital Transformation. We have a complete ministry separate and apart for digital transformation. Is focused on implementing its digital transformation program, which commences in fiscal 2022. This began last month. This will encompass 3 new programs: Digital Society Program, Digital Economy Program, and Digital Government Program. Collectively, these programs aim to improve the information technology infrastructure of the public service. The development and future introduction of a digital identity for all citizens and residents for shared use by all sectors, and the expansion of cloud-based services can also allow for the design of tailor-made services that cater to the specific needs of individuals. The Ministry of Education plans to embark on a digital transformation program to facilitate digital fluency at all levels in the education system and among stakeholders. The Ministry of Planning and Development is transforming the Central Statistical Office. This will allow for accurate and up-to-date information from one central source. Data is a valuable tool for the planning and allocation of resources, as we know. The adoption of big data technologies will thus allow for the real-time publication of economic and financial data. Statistical agencies such as the CSO face multiple challenges in the present environment. Traditional methods of collecting data, whether asking businesses or individuals to complete surveys, gathering price data by sending enumerators to stores, face increasing challenges. Big data will not offer all the answers and cannot replace official statistics, but it offers the potential to fill in the missing gaps and create cost and human resource efficiencies. It can be a complement to existing forms of data and traditional official statistics to bolster evidence-based policymaking. The Ministry of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries began its investment in geographic information systems 10 years ago, with the conversion of the organization's paper-based filing system to a multi-layered GIS dataset. The GIS unit focuses on the production and distribution of meaningful geospatial data sets, paper maps, and interactive mapping applications for ministry departments to see, analyze, and understand patterns and relationships. That ministry will also be exploring smart agriculture programs with a focus on artificial intelligence. This will explore the incorporation of the use of information communication technology in agriculture with artificial intelligence-driven systems to expand agriculture databases, to inform decision-making for better harvesting and improved environmental conditions. Big data is also being utilized through the Ministry of Health geospatial applications to identify the location of people with mosquito-borne and airborne viruses to seek to contain outbreaks in communities. The Ministry of Health has also embarked on an initiative to implement a health information system for the newly constructed ARIMA and Point Fortin General Hospitals, with the intention of expanding the health information system to other hospitals in Trinidad and Tobago. The health information system is envisaged to play a key role in providing a centralized repository for all patient records, building on the concept of one patient, one record, improving the efficiency and productivity of operations, the management of hospitals, improving the decision-making, as well as reporting capabilities based on data collected, and generally to improve the overall management and delivery of healthcare within the hospitals. The Town and Country Planning Division of the Ministry of Planning and Development has made major progress in the digitalization of town and country physical records. This provides for better access to and analysis of data sets to allow for easy incorporation into the automated construction permitting system, which we introduced some time ago. The Office of the Prime Minister, the Cabinet Secretariat, has managed its own big data project with the design and deployment of an enterprise content management system. This is one of the largest document repositories within the government, with over 10 million pages of scanned data so far, and the capacity to store 1 quadrillion documents. The Ministry of Social Development and Family Services has also embarked on implementing an integrated social enterprise management system. As the key social sector ministry responsible for coordinating the implementation of the government's social development objectives, that ministry ensures the efficient and effective functioning of the sector by providing a network of integrated and accessible social programs and services. Big data use can add depth of information on human behaviors and experiences. It can be instrumental in highlighting nefarious or corrupt elements within the system. This is critical because we must ensure that the people who need help are the ones who receive it. This system, this management solution, through the efficient use of data, is expected to incur the following benefits, to name a few: providing timely assistance to persons who are deemed to be in need, value for money, transparency and accountability in the use of state resources, efficiency and effectiveness, high quality customer care, and positive financial, operational, and stakeholder impacts. The government has also agreed recently to subscribe fully to the International Monetary Fund, IMF, enhanced general data dissemination system, which supports improved data transparency, encourages statistical development, and very importantly, helps create synergies between data dissemination and policy making. The ubiquity of the use of new technological developments such as fintech, distributed ledger technologies, including blockchain and artificial intelligence in trade, commerce, and the public sector, requires a revision of the legal and regulatory frameworks. As part of the government's focus on digital transformation as a key pillar for development, we will be actively removing any legislative barriers or hindrances to innovation or the proper adoption of such technologies in Trinidad and Tobago. Among the key considerations is data protection. It is essential that any big data ecosystem also includes measures to prevent abuse. Users' rights will remain at the forefront of any policy governing big data. The government will therefore engage in legislative review to ensure instances of potential for abuse, such as the case whereby the political consulting firm, the infamous, notorious Cambridge Analytica, was found to have misused individual electronic data for the purposes of interfering with the electoral process of various countries. We have set before us an aggressive agenda to ensure that Trinidad and Tobago does not get left behind, but that we are positioned to lead the region in technology. I would like to assure the public that the government is committed to ensuring that all of these projects will come to fruition. Trinidad and Tobago has the capacity to harness all the potential of big data, owing to modern telecommunications infrastructure, our state-of-the-art Tier 3 data centers, 100% mobile cellular network coverage for the population since last year, high mobile penetration of 142%, which means more than one phone for every citizen and resident of Trinidad and Tobago, internet penetration of 77%, with over 1 million internet users, and a highly qualified talent pool to propel data analytics. I cannot close without extending my congratulations to the United Nations for its success in hosting the second iteration of the United Nations Trinidad and Tobago Big Data Forum. In 2020, your organization said that Trinidad and Tobago is well poised to be the home for a center of excellence on big data analytics. We believe that that is true. As we have heard, the government is hard at work to make that statement a possibility. We recognize that data could be our new oil. I would also like to commend your partnership with the Central Statistical Office. Your work with the CSO resulted in the creation of new baselines and indicators identified for creating a richer data pool that will track our country's progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. I look forward to hearing more collaborations like these in the future, and I thank you for allowing me to participate in this forum. Thank you.
Minister, thank you so much, not just for joining us, but for this very in-depth presentation that certainly resonates very much with us at the UN in our own efforts to support the country and government in really the attempt to build economies back better, stronger, coming out of what is and has been quite an impressive downward spiral triggered by COVID-19. But I really very much liked how you pointed to the need for adequate legislation to create this enabling environment, but also the commitment of the Finance Ministry to drive this change in the public sector. Very much appreciated your very practical example of how you started already at the ministry to translate this ambition of the government into action, and the acknowledgement that the potential for the digital transformation of the government is vast. So a lovely send-off to start this second day. Very, very appreciated. I would like now to open the floor to questions and comments. One or two are already coming in. Colleagues and participants around this virtual meeting room, at the bottom on your right-hand corner, there's the Q&A button. Please press that and type in your question or comment so we can put it in front of the panelists. And I would like to open the panel session now, maybe with a first question to Mr. Outridge. Following the minister's overview and the clarity with which he also presented his agenda, the TTIFC is tasked with the development of the financial services sector and very much also driving the financial technology integration across all sectors here in Trinidad and Tobago. With the appropriate enabling environment, how would you see the potential for big data technologies, the applications, the services for the more effective economic financial modeling, but also its potential for boosting the financial sector in Trinidad and Tobago?
Thanks for that, Marina, and morning again to the Honorable Minister, and morning again to Mr. Leoncini. I would like to respond, obviously by stating that, as the Minister outlined in his opening remarks, the TTIFC is really our main objective. The core mission is to drive cashless throughout our society. And obviously key to achieving this is the combination of many data sets, by understanding the personas and the behaviors, coupled with basically the available technology, and basically trying to understand the different strategies. So there's a huge potential as it relates to the financial sector, both private and public, for big data tools. And from the TTIFC's perspective, the financial sector provides for some of the, I would say, the richest use cases for big data. We have been observing, for example, particularly within the private sector, a number of financial institutions actually pivoting and focusing a lot on developing their own digital transformation programs. Again, the pandemic has sort of basically sort of accelerated that sort of need. And even from our perspective, in terms of where we are in Trinidad and Tobago, so when we started to understand data, so for example, in 2020, there was a consultancy conducted by our friends here at CAF, which showed that basically from a country perspective, we have an average of about 1.5 million bank accounts across the sector. So that's basically one account per person, right? And further to this, we also examined that from a card perspective. We had over 700,000 people with access to a debit card, while you had 200,000 people with access to a credit card. But when we looked at from the point of the usage perspective, again, that's what the access, only about 41% of those persons were actually using those technologies, with majority of persons choosing to use cash instead. And again, asking the right questions about that data to try to figure out the inferences, right? Because looking at those statistics, we still have about 19% of the population which we classify as unbanked or unbankable. That's about 200,000 persons. So being able to understand the data, being able to get the insight, how do we develop strategies? What do we sort of position from a government policy perspective, from the financial sector perspective, from a product perspective to reach out to get those persons to sort of join the formal economy? But one of the examples I want to bring, as you were mentioning, particularly in the private sector, and I know persons who are part of the insurance industry would be very familiar, would have been the whole introduction of the IFRS 17 standard, which I call basically a perfect storm for big data. So that basically has been postponed to January 1st, 2023 for compliance, which I'm sure many companies would breathe in a sigh of relief. But that whole aspect of that standard was to allow for greater transparency by defining principles for the recognition, aggregation, valuation, and accounting for all insurance and reinsurance contracts. So if you understand the size of the insurance sector, particularly in Trinidad and Tobago, and they deal with a large percentage of the population, almost everything requires insurance. So again, when you start to look at the significant data connectivity as, particularly when you have change in standards and change of adjustments, this is really about, how do we go about establishing a single source of the truth? And I think the minister identified from the government is sort of taking the lead with the digital identity program, which is geared to solve a number of different problems. And my last sort of comment from that perspective, as I mentioned to you, where we are in the public and from the private sector and seeing the advent of those strategies is that, from the IFC's perspective with our private sector stakeholders, if you don't have a chief data officer at the C-suite level, your data transformation journey has already failed.
Perfect, thank you so much. Moving on, before I actually have a couple of questions coming in for the minister. One question to Mr. Leoncini, especially from where you sit as the head of an IFI, a financial institution, most of the data we generate today is really still quite unstructured and comes in different forms. But big data capacities and capabilities, we talked about it, the minister pointed that out, allow for much better process and better service delivery at the end of the day. From your point of view of development financing, how do you value the idea of scaling up existing data science research center, a center the minister already mentioned, so that, for example, countries like Trinidad and Tobago can benefit from greater data insights, but also analytics to boost, very much in line with what Mr. Outridge just said, the whole service industry in that sector.
Thank you, Marina. Thank you very much, the United Nations, for this invitation, and thank you to Minister for a very comprehensive and insightful speech. From the point of view of CAF, well, we are in front of an opportunity that can really alter like the relation between the citizens and the state in a positive way if it is harnessed correctly. We see that this affects like the formulation, implementation, evaluation of public policies, the quality of services that government provides to business and people, also the internal efficiency of government institutions, and of course, the correct implementation or the correct use of this opportunity is based on having a national strategy and correct data governance, which includes the production of data and its administration, bearing in mind the risks that were mentioned, like to privacy, to cybersecurity, etc. So for international financial organizations like CAF, this is a major topic for intervention and collaboration with governments, and we are actively doing so with Trinidad and Tobago. I would like to mention that we in 2019 created a special division that is called Digital Innovation in Government Division, which has this mandate to foster open, agile, and innovative government in Latin America and the Caribbean. We have been in a very open dialogue and collaboration with the government of Trinidad and Tobago since. And well, they are working on topics such as capacity building on digital government, better regulation, administrative simplification, public integrity and transparency, and also help to local governments. I would like to stress that CAF brings concessional loans, technical assistance, but probably one of our major assets is that we generate knowledge and share knowledge by bringing in best practices that we identify among our different member countries. And as John mentioned, we in the project we did together last year with the Ministry of Finance, Central Bank, and TTIFC was a matter of bringing best experiences from around Latin America and the Caribbean and other places to try to help in making better legislation in the country. We are also engaging under the coordination of the Ministry of Finance, with whom we coordinate oral action here, in also participating in the digitalization of the payment or online payments of taxes, which is something on which we are starting to work. On the financial services aspect. In education, we have a technical assistance project here for which we're doing with UNICEF to prepare online books, but also looking more into the future. We are engaging in the whole digitalization process of the primary and secondary schools in making sure that more useful quality data is used to tackle issues like school dropout, for example. No, that's something where big data is definitely going to provide a useful tool. And agriculture was also mentioned. I think that this is a sector where a qualitative jump can be achieved now that it is being prioritized and seen as a strategic sector. As it was mentioned, the digital tools that we can use, for example, to digitize the value chains from the farms to the markets is something where huge qualitative leaps can be undertaken. And well, we are currently working with FAO here in a technical assistance project that is going to start next year. So just like with those examples, to reiterate our commitment and our also vocation to work in a coordinate way, as we have been doing with other financial institutions and international organizations like the United Nations, to provide the most effective possible support to government in this key issue that is transversal to, I think, all our actions as a financial organization.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Gianpiero. Minister, your presentation has generated a lot of interest. And so some of the questions we are getting in are referring or asking, you know, there's a lot of interest to participate in some of the initiatives you outlined. So there's interest to understand a little bit what the timeline is, some of the practical examples you provided to really translate it into action. And then specifically in your point of view, you know, how can service providers, SMEs participate and boost these initiatives? And also, how do you see the participation of each and every citizen in really helping the government to carry this vision forward?
Well, that's a very hard question, but I'll try my best. Our time frame is the end of 2022. So we set ourselves quite an ambitious timeline. So by the end of December 2022, we must have achieved most, if not all, of the assignments we have set for ourselves, which are a national e-identity for each citizen, cashless transactions throughout most, if not all, of the public service, and public access to data while ensuring privacy. So that's the timeline, end of next year. With respect to the participation of SMEs and assistance to SMEs, one of the things I did in this year's budget was to establish a fund to assist small and medium enterprises to develop more discipline, more fiscal discipline, that is. But also the government has agreed to provide services to small and medium enterprises, which it may not be able to afford or easily access, such as accounting services, management services, and so on. And now that you have raised this issue, the whole question of assisting small and medium enterprises to digitize certainly will form part of that fund. It's a $50 million facility. We intend to start rolling it out early in calendar 2022 to establish an office, a unit that will provide outreach services and assist SMEs to have the necessary discipline, but also to enable them to work in the new digital environment. So I don't know how, if that answers the question, with respect to participation of citizens. I think that is something that will have to evolve. I'm not sure how citizens can participate in transforming the government's digital platforms, but certainly I'd welcome any suggestions.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Excellent response. Fully in line with the question. Thank you so much. Mr. Outridge, there's one very concrete question we're getting in. How far would you say is the Trinidadian economy away from this idea of a cashless society? And how much of a disadvantage would this pose on our economy if we neglect in the country to really push for that?
Thank you. Very good question. I think the minister signaled it by giving that date, right? December 2022. And it have done so obviously from the confidence and seeing the work that has been undertaken by the numerous amounts of agencies. So, but there's a very interesting point you raised, because it was the first focus of the IFC as it related to enabling payments, right? So what I can say, even from my experience working throughout the region, at least from a local perspective, we have done significant work and excellent work as it relates to the regulations and the legislations to support these various payments. I was actually on a panel a week ago talking about data legislation, Electronic Transactions Act, and I was actually quoted where our Electronic Transactions Act was basically one of the most robust pieces of legislation in other developing countries. And we had a lot of parts of it proclaimed to really sort of accelerate where we are going. And the important point that you mentioned just now in terms of, it's not just about enabling online credit card payments, because as I mentioned in my further rebuttal, we have to look at the data to see what are the access opportunities, particularly as it relates to the most vulnerable in society. Cash is a huge problem for us here in Trinidad and Tobago and globally, because cash creates opportunities for fraud. It's problematic. You know, it's just riddled with challenges and issues, and that's the whole drive to cashless. So actually, our first focus is actually looking to see where we can leverage the decentralized networks that we have on the island through our bill payment collectors, through our persons who operate vouchers, operators, and so forth, to look for the opportunities for persons to give them the ability to leverage those networks to transact with government, you know. So our first focus is really on the cash translation aspect, and we have done a lot of good work as it relates to that. And as I mentioned, the debit and the credit card infrastructure has been here for quite some time. We have a very robust banking sector. We have both Visa and MasterCard that operate out of the region. So I have no fear for that. But the first and foremost priority is really around financial inclusion and getting the vulnerable to be part of the formal economy and focusing with them to actually bring them part of and increase the service delivery.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. And one more question for the Honorable Minister. And yesterday we already talked about the new Ministry for Digital Transformation. But again, the question from the floor is, are there any definite intentions for using big data technologies in the center of government, within ministries? Where is this happening and how do you see that proceeding? Sorry, you're on mute, Minister. Still on mute. Can we unmute him? Can we unmute him? For some reason, you're still on mute. I'm so terribly sorry. The technology doesn't want us to collaborate anymore. Perfect.
Yeah, good.
How about
Good.
that?
Yes.
Yes, I was trying to unmute and you were trying to unmute me. So that's a double mute, I guess. Yes, we have decided that the Ministry of Digital Transformation will drive this process. That's why we created a separate ministry, and it's headed by a minister who has experience, expertise, qualifications in the area, very knowledgeable person, Minister Backus. And we do intend to create our own data centers here in Trinidad and Tobago, rather than relying on outside technology and outside investor interest. We intend to create and drive our own big data centers here and use big data throughout all government departments. But that is really the mission of the Ministry of Digital Transformation.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And there was also discussed yesterday, of course, already very much the reference to the ministry and the very ambitious agenda. Turning back to Mr. Leoncini, in general, and you already referred to some of the lessons learned that CAF very much tries also to bring to its work in Trinidad and Tobago, learning from parallel efforts in other countries. You know, the question is always one, and we also see this coming from the floor, about implementation. You know, creating a smarter economy really means that local industries and sectors must be at par with the policy prescription that are trying and are promoting a more digitalized and technology driven economy. How do you, or how does CAF see that a government, a society can move the needle from the conversation to actually transforming, to implementing such a transformation?
Yes, thank you, Marina. We agree with what the minister said during the speech. As what was the diagnostic from last year's forum, in the sense that there is a key moment here in Trinidad, the potential, the political will to achieve this transformation. And of course, this dialogue sets a scene and a balance, but I think things are really moving forward, and we are focusing on providing support across the board. As I said, in the preparation of a strategy that must have data governance as a key issue, but it's also investing in infrastructure, in human capital, and of course, the financing can come from several sources, and CAF will definitely be one of them. No, and I believe that the work that is being done to create an enabling environment, legislative, and by pushing digital government in every area of government is the key and is what is going to take us there towards a successful implementation.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And another question from the floor, probably for Mr. Outridge to respond to. Besides policy, is infrastructure a limiting factor to the transformation across Trinidad and Tobago?
I wouldn't say infrastructure. As I mentioned, we have a pretty robust financial sector. And as when you look at the ingredients, you look at the regulations and the legislation, it's all there. What we do need is really to look at, a sort of robust change management approach, because the honest truth is, we are looking at transacting in a digital world for the public sector at least. And this is an entirely new change of operating model for them. It's no longer about having a cashier at a ministry's office, but versus you are, as a citizen, you are interfacing with an interface. And, again, from that back-end process, the adapting and the rules and the new sort of opportunities for upskilling within the public sector. So I would say from an infrastructure perspective, and as the minister mentioned, we have a very high internet penetration rate. We have very high access of devices and connectivity. So I believe that is there. What is required is more both education on the public end. So again, from a digital inclusion standpoint, so they can trust and be comfortable in using these devices. Even ourselves in every day today, you're always hesitant when you're doing online shopping if it's not with a trusted source like Amazon. Yeah. So being able to translate that confidence by having the persons in the back end, being the roles and responsibilities, I think is the sort of hurdle that we now need to put some emphasis and focus on moving that forward. But from an infrastructure perspective, as I mentioned, I believe we are there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And maybe since we're almost out of time with the last question to the minister, because in keeping with this very ambitious agenda and path that you outlined, the government thrust towards a smarter future, a lot of the emphasis is indeed on the transformation. So from where you sit at the Ministry of Finance, and as part of this roadmap to creating the smarter economy through technology and analytics, do you envision a bigger demand for investments in technology, research and training? And so to say, are you getting ready for that?
Are we good now?
Yes, you are.
We seem to have a problem with this muting, at least on my end. I just wanted to make the point that we have committed as a government to provide the Ministry of Digital Transformation with all of the funding it requires, because we consider this to be a core function of the government. We're also committed to providing all of our ministries, departments, and agencies with the necessary funding. One of the most important things is access to proper technology, modern technology, hardware, and software. One of the other issues will be training. We found that quite a few people in the system, they're not tech savvy. Some of them have grown up without becoming tech savvy, and they now occupy senior positions within the public service. So there's a lot of training that is going to be required, and the government has committed to invest whatever funding is necessary to ensure that public servants and service delivery agencies are trained and become comfortable with the use of technology. With respect to our move to cashless payments, we recognize that there's quite a large proportion of persons who are unbanked. And at the Ministry of Finance, I've been working with the central bank, who recently issued guidelines to the commercial banks to lower the know your customer requirements for persons below a certain income level, to make it much easier for the unbanked and persons who don't have a bank account to get a bank account. That's one of the problems nowadays with financial intelligence, problems with money laundering, and so on. It's not as easy nowadays to get a bank account as it was, say, 20 years ago. It's quite a rigorous process, and quite a few people who are at the lower levels of the society become frustrated and don't complete the process. So one of the things the Ministry of Finance is doing is creating that enabling environment, identifying where the problems are and finding solutions that will work, that would achieve our goal. I listened to Mr. Outridge. He made an important point that even though we have 700,000 credit or debit cards in Trinidad and Tobago, they are only used 40% of the time. I remember looking at young people who have studied abroad and come back to Trinidad, and they only use their debit card or their credit card. They don't use cash. In fact, there are some young people that have no cash with them at any time. And in fact, when they need cash, they become confused because they're so accustomed to using the digital technology. And therefore, at our level, we will provide all of the investment required. We will encourage companies and firms to invest in technology, make the necessary investment, because at the end of the day, it's going to be cheaper, easier, faster, quicker, more efficient to use digital technology to conduct so many services. I myself, I can pay for television services and other services using an online portal. I couldn't do that 5 years ago. So that, yes, investment is required. The government is committed to providing all of the necessary investment and funding, and we will encourage the private sector, perhaps through tax concessions, perhaps through legislative incentives to invest in digital technology.
Minister, thank you so much, not just for joining, but really for going deep with us and the almost 100 participants this morning. Really appreciated you took the time, especially since you're carrying 2 functions this week. Thank you so very much. A big thank you to Mr. Leoncini and also to Mr. Outridge for joining us this morning. We could have continued. There were a lot more questions coming in, but we have to close this now, as for now. But given the interest of this, it's quite sure that we will continue with the Big Data Forum as a continuum, as it seems to be tickling the interest of not just the participants, but many across academia and the private sector. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Very appreciated.
Thank you, my pleasure.